What is up, everybody? Bootman here, and I am super excited as well as honored to introduce to you the brand new Series 5 card, Echo. All right, so Echo is a brand new tech card, and she is a 1/2, and her ability reads, after your opponent plays an ongoing card here, remove its abilities. All right, and those of you who are familiar with me and my channel, you know that I am a massive tech card fan, so I am super excited about this brand new card in Marvel Snap. All right, so in this video, I wanted to introduce this new card, show you a little bit of gameplay, go over some decks, and discuss what cards this will be good against and what cards it might not be so great against, all right? So first up, let's get it out of the way. Let's talk about the counter cards to Echo, all right? So there aren't many. The few that I came up with that I thought of immediately, well, the first one was obviously Killmonger, all right? So Killmonger destroys every single one-cost card out there on the board. Echo being a 1/2, Killmonger is something that we need to worry about, all right? Next up, we have Spider-Man 2099. So Spider-Man 2099 is one of the newer cards. If the person doesn't have Killmonger, they can bring Spider-Man 2099 over to that location and blow up one of the cards. Now, Echo typically won't be the only card on the location, and Spider-Man 2099 picks a random card, so you might get lucky and it might not hit your Echo, all right? But let's dive into some of the cards that Echo is similar to. So one thing about Echo, before we dive into this, is that Echo only affects your opponent. So this is really good. There are a lot of cards in the game that affect you and your opponent. For example, if you were to Enchantress on a lane, it will disable your ongoing cards as well as your opponent's. With Echo, one of her benefits is that she will only disable the ongoing cards on the opposite end. But something about Echo that I hope people realize with this tech card is that Echo has this kind of invisible power, is what I call it. So Echo is a lot like other cards in the game where you won't actually see how beneficial she is to the game. So it plays a little mind game with you, and I don't think people will respect this card as much because they aren't actually seeing what's happening, because any good player isn't just gonna come out there and drop an ongoing card on your Echo lane. So I like to think of Echo similar to some of these other cards that we have up on the screen: Rock Slide, Korg, Baron Mordo, Iceman, America Chavez. So like Rock Slide and Korg, they're putting rocks into your opponent's deck. You're not going to physically see that it's just putting rocks into your opponent's deck and into their hand and stopping some of their potentially good draws, but they are very powerful. We have Baron Mordo, who puts a 6-cost card into their hand. We have Iceman, who tags one of their cards, and we're not sure which one it is, but it is messing up their curve. And then there's everybody's favorite America Chavez, which improves the consistency of your deck. So Echo is going to be a lot like these cards, where you're not always going to see how beneficial she is. One of the best things about Echo is that she's going to control where your opponents can and can't play, all right? Since people aren't going to be dropping ongoing cards on that lane, what you can deduct from this is that they're only going to play in 2 of 3 lanes, so it gives you less to worry about for some of those 50-50 scenarios that we all run into, okay? Now, I kind of think of Echo similar to like Teenage Warhead, but almost better, all right? Because Teenage Warhead, although she's an awesome card as well, Echo doesn't disappear if the opponent does play there, whereas Teenage Warhead does blow up, all right? So again, good players aren't going to be playing there, but it's gonna offer a lot of control for the scenario. So now let's jump into what everybody's excited for, and it's the decks that you could put Echo into. So I do think that Echo will be sort of meta dependent. So right now, Echo might be, a certain level of good, but when other decks get really popular, as the meta ebbs and flows with new patch updates, with OTA changes, you're gonna wish that you had Echo in your deck when a lot of ongoing decks are out there for Echo to really, really be effective, all right? But there are some decks that Echo is good with right now. And with these decks that I put together, I put in the man that Echo will always pair nicely with, and that is Wong, because Wong's biggest enemy is that little doggo Cosmo, all right? So this first deck that we have here is Wong Conda, all right? So this is hoping to buff cards and get a lot of power out on the board. So obviously we have Echo here to protect your Wong from a Cosmo. We have Wakanda characters like Okoye, Nakia, and Black Panther. So Okoye is gonna buff everything in your deck +1. Nakia is going to hit everything in your hand. She was recently buffed. And then we have Black Panther, who doubles up, all right? So ideally, we're going to get Wong into Black Panther and Zola, but something to keep in mind, typically with this combination, you're only having Wong, Black Panther, and Zola on your lane, so sometimes, if you go for this combo, your Arnim Zola will copy your Echo onto 2 other lanes, which isn't going to be as beneficial as copying like Wong into Black Panther. So just keep that in the back of your mind, all right? But we also have backup plans here, like White Tiger, Dr. Doom, Odin. So there are some other things that we could do with this deck if we don't pull off our ultimate combo that we're looking for. Next up, we have a deck called Wong Throwing Cards. This is one of my new favorite decks. I've been playing it for a little bit now, and when Echo was released, I was like, you know what? Let's toss Echo in here. So this is a deck that gets really big and your opponent often doesn't expect it, so you can steal a lot of cubes with this deck. So we have cards like Morbius, Collector, and Mystique. All 3 of these cards can get massive. We're talking about like 20, 30 power, massive, all right? Because we're also benefiting from discard and hand size. So discard is going to buff Morbius, and if you copy Mystique onto Morbius, they're both gonna get buffed. But then we also have Collector, who's going to get bigger from cards like Swarm, once that gets discarded. We have Helicarrier and Apocalypse. And then we have our man MODOK here, who discards your whole hand. But with the Wong combo, not only is Wong going to be great with things like MODOK or even Lady Sif or Colleen Wing, you can go for the ultimate move, which is Wong into Gambit. And if you copy Mystique onto Wong, you're gonna destroy a lot of things. And once again, Echo is here to make sure that nobody blocks your Wong with a Cosmo. Last up, for all of you Silver Surfer fans, for you Mr. Negative deck fans, we have a deck I like to call Negecko, all right? So this is a negative Echo deck, but it also has Silver Surfer. So we have Bast here to buff a lot of your 0 power cards in your hand, and it's also going to improve Wolfsbane and Brood. If Mr. Negative gets hit, it's not a -1 anymore. But anyways, you have a few different routes that you can go with this. Hopefully we're getting Mr. Negative out early to get as many cards swapped in our hand or in our deck as possible, all right? And you can get Negative out early with Zabu or Psylocke. But yeah, then we can copy Mystique onto Wong or Mystique onto Iron Man, and then we're gonna buff everything up, hopefully multiple times with Silver Surfer, and you have your 3 cost cards in here like Brood, Wolfsbane, and Ironheart, okay? So now, again, I have to reiterate that Echo might be meta dependent, so she will be better at some times than others, but there are going to be cards that Echo is always phenomenal against. So first up is Sarah. Sarah lists are always popular lists, okay? Sarah has been in the top of the meta for as long as I can remember. So if you're really lucky, or if you're a psychic, you might be able to drop down Echo right where they're about to drop down Sarah, and then you could disable Sarah, completely mess up their game plan, all right? But if not, what will happen more often than not, you can determine where they're going to play their Sarah because they're not gonna play it on an Echo lane if you had to play Echo out early. Next, we have Claw. Claw is a very powerful card, and I don't think enough people use this card, but Claw is often used in lockdown decks. So if somebody storms a location or they Professor X a location, they want to use Claw to get 6 extra power in there. Well, with Echo, you could play Echo out and then completely make it so they can't play that play, right? So let's say they played Storm to the right and they're gonna play Claw in the middle. Well, if you drop their Echo there before they drop their Claw, they're not getting that 6 power in the lane because Echo's going to disable Claw, all right? So Echo's always gonna be great against Cosmo. Although you might not be able to hit Cosmo directly, you're gonna know for a fact that they can't play Cosmo in this lane. So when certain ongoing decks get really popular that people like to block with Cosmo, if you drop Echo there, you know for a fact that they're not gonna be able to block that lane with Cosmo. So if you're a fan of other tech cards like Shang-Chi or Enchantress, you know that they're not going to be able to play Cosmo in that lane. All right, we also have cards like Super Scroll that get pretty popular. We also have Wong for people who like to use Wong. You can make sure that if they're playing a Wong deck, they're not gonna be able to play him there. And last up, we have our new card, Jean Grey, that a lot of people have been big fans of, and you can make sure that they're not playing Jean Grey in a certain location. Now, this is an important one, all right? So since people really love destroy decks, I think Echo is going to be really, really good against Null. Although someone might not drop Null on your Echo lane, you're going to be able to control where they play their Null. Oftentimes, people playing destroy decks are going to drop Null on a location where they need more power. Well, if you manage to put your Echo there, you know that they're either A, not gonna play Null there, or B, if they do play there, Null's gonna be 0 power. But I cannot emphasize this enough, okay? Leading up to this card, I saw a lot of people saying like, oh, Echo's gonna be great against Galactus decks. She will not be. Because with the recent Galactus changes, Galactus, by his very nature, is going to have priority going into the final turn, all right? Because in order for Galactus to get played, he has to be winning in power, which means going into the final turn, he's going to have priority. The way Echo works is it's only going to affect cards that play after her. So if somebody played Wave and then they played Galactus on turn 5, they're going to be able to drop their Null first on turn 6 before you drop your Echo. So if you're playing against a Galactus deck, don't stay in thinking that Echo is going to win you the game. Next up, we have Devil Dino and Darkhawk. These are two of the best ongoing cards in the game, and when I sit here and I talk to you about how the meta kind of ebbs and flows and it shifts with different balance changes and OTA updates, we always see Devil Dino and Darkhawk come back into the meta as two of the strongest cards in a variety of different decks, okay? Echo will be amazing against these cards, especially when they're at the top of the meta. You're gonna wish that you had Echo in your deck. You're going to be able to determine where they can and cannot play these two cards, which often win lanes, all right? So if you are on a lane and it looks like they could win with a Devil Dino or Darkhawk, you drop your Echo there to make sure that they're not gonna be able to play there, okay? So, the last of these decks that is pretty powerful, that Echo will be great against, is Patriot decks. Patriot has been one of the best cards in the game for a while now, and the Patriot ongoing list get really, really popular at different points in time, and Echo will be great, all right? So a lot of people are also running Mystique with Patriot, and sometimes they even like to play that Mystique in the same lane as Patriot. So you can block that with Echo. But Onslaught is a very powerful card to play in Patriot decks, and Onslaught has to be played on that lane. So even if you don't disable their Patriot, if you drop an Echo on that lane, you can guarantee that they won't be able to play Onslaught. And a lot of these lists also run Iron Man, so you can also make sure that they're not going to run Iron Man on one of those lanes. Now, something that's very important to know about Echo, which I wasn't sure about until the wonderful Glenn Jones replied to me on Twitter, is that Echo actually works against Rogue and Mystique, okay? So these are on reveal cards that turn into ongoing cards. So if you're playing a Wong deck and you drop Echo on that lane, although Rogue will still disable your Wong, Echo will disable Rogue, so they won't be able to steal your Wong's ability, which is very beneficial. And like I was saying with like Patriot lists or any of the lists that we went over earlier where Mystique would be good to copy an ongoing card, they will not be able to Mystique on that lane because if they drop it on that lane, Mystique just turns into a 3-0 card, which isn't too great, all right? Now, the last thing that we gotta be very mindful of is that there are going to be cards that absolutely love playing against Echo. And basically, it's any card that will be in a Sauron list, all right? So there are multiple cards that have ongoing abilities that negatively affect the player, and it's because they're very powerful cards. So you have Typhoid Mary that gives -1 to everything on the board on your side. We have Red Skull, which buffs the other cards on that lane. Then we have Ebony Maw that prevents you from playing in that location, and then we have Lizard that loses power if the opponent fills the lane. Well, if you drop Echo, the opponent is going to absolutely love playing these cards on that lane because Echo's going to disable their effects. I did see some people on Twitter suggesting too that it might even be a good idea to toss Viper in a deck with these cards to flip Echo over to your opponent's side and then make sure that you could disable the ongoing effects of these cards. Thought it was pretty smart. Don't know if it'll work all that often, but just something to play around with if you decide to pick up this awesome new Series 5 card. All right, everybody, that is your first look at Echo, the brand new card in Marvel Snap. I hope you're as excited about this card as I am. Let me know down in the comments, have you been experimenting with Echo? What deck ideas do you have for Echo? What are your thoughts on this card? I would love to hear from you, all right? And just in case you're not over on my channel, make sure you come check out my channel. I make a ton of Marvel Snap content to help you rank up the ladder to hit Infinite, or if you enjoy playing in the brand new Conquest mode, I got the content for you. All right, so thank you once again for Marvel Snap for inviting me on, and for all of you, have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.